Good day. My name is Jaydev Chiba, and welcome to another TechCentral podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about Ricoh's safe and secure role in today's digital ecosystems, and with a specific focus on GRC, or governance, risk, and compliance. And Ricoh, as we all know, is an information management and a digital services company. That's Ricoh, spelled R-I-C-O-H, for those of you not familiar with the name. So with me in the studio today to discuss the topic is Marcell Otto. Marcell is the Digital Services Product Manager for Ricoh South Africa. So Marcell, welcome to the studio. Good to have you here today. I think to kick off our conversation, it'll be good for you to set the scene for us in terms of what you're seeing both locally and globally in terms of cyber and cybercrime particularly.
Great. Perfect. Thanks. Thanks, Jaydev. Nice to be here again. And yes, wow, where to start? I think if we just think of global, just think of the last couple of days. If you look at the INC Bank of China, who basically the US leg of it that was affected with that, and obviously the consequences and massive impacts of that, of the information breach. And that's one of your most sensitive type of institutions, financial institutions, obviously, that you get. So security measures must be top notch, but obviously, we're dealing with a warfare, basically with cyber criminals. That is something that is really difficult to match with law enforcement, and specifically, I think, in all different elements, in all the different ways that cybercrime has now transpired. I think cybercrime in the whole, if we think of it and talk in the bigger picture, there's so many different types. There was also a recent thing about scams on social media with people being lured, and we know about bullying in school, but for businesses, we know one of the biggest, and security is regarded as one of the top risks and concerns for organizations today, with information technology and working with data and compliance and compromising of that data. But apart from that, DP World, the logistics and supply chain management shipping company that the ports got to stand still in Australia, that's crazy as well. We had local examples like that a couple of years ago, public sector.
Transnet, etc.
Yes, for example, force majeure brought to our knees, where you can't expect it. I think locally more, there's been enough reputational damage. Maybe I don't want to mention too many organizations, but I think there's good examples, more specifically recently also within the private sector, where, if you look at the data breach, you're suffering the consequences of that breach, and in some cases your data and your reputational loss because of cybercrime and a ransomware attack, for example, taking your data hostage, and then sometimes that could cost you, your fines that you need to, or your release for getting access to your data, which is not guaranteed either. So most companies that even pay the ransom is not guaranteed that they and don't get their data always back. So there's the cost of that, but then more to that is the reputational and then all the compliance nowadays. If you look at in South Africa, and there was a notice from information regulator served for with enough time after recent incidents happened, basically to ensure that they get their cybersecurity measures in place with all the certificates and protocols and measures that they need to have in place within their cybersecurity strategy, basically. So they've been given time to rectify it and then and take action on it to ensure that something like this does not occur again. And if they fail to do so, they will be penalized. And, there could be, currently, I think we're looking at examples. There was the first fine, which was in the public sector and
yes,
on an
I've
office
seen that as well,
which was also a similar case, I think, and now this one in private. And I think, there's going to be a time where it's not going to be just an example anymore. I think they're going to probably grind down on it. So, yes, so it's massive. I think it's obviously really broad. And yes. I think we can talk about that for a long time.
I think the trend is obvious that, in the past we consider ourselves, well, we could be safe, we won't be breached, and now it's almost a case of everybody is potentially going to be breached or will be breached at some point. So it's not a question of if, but rather when, and what are you doing about it? So clearly the consequences for organizations, as you mentioned, are quite severe, whether it's a business or whether it's the public sector. You've mentioned some of those consequences. I don't know if you can just elaborate a little bit about, what are the consequences that organizations suffer. Obviously, they lose some of their data. They don't try and recover it, but there are other consequences, in terms of reputational damage, financial damage, etc. If you want to just share a little bit more about that.
Sure, perfect. Look, I think if you just look at some of the analyst reports and statements and findings, I think 200 days roughly to that you're looking at after being a victim of an attack like this for business to almost start returning to normal. So, and then even marketing costs afterwards that they're spending, marketing budgets increasing about 65% after that again for 2 years after. They've got to compromise other things as well. There's other laws and regulations apart from POPIA, for example, and apart from, I think your ethical and your types of codes of conduct and policies and procedures that you have in place. But I think the bigger compromise is definitely, if you, from your personal perspective, been affected by your data as a person being compromised, and my private information and my credit card details because of a business I supported online, and now my credit card details are being used in crime syndicates, and I don't know what else my personal information is being used for, and where it exists in a dark web after something like that. So the trust and everything, I think, there's a lot that you can't, obviously, it's going to be difficult to measure, and it's going to take, I think, many years to actually really look back and see the consequences of it, and taking all the other things into consideration as well, like pandemics and things like that, into your data trends and things. But I think, it's really, it's something that no business can afford. I think if you also look at it, the effect on the bottom line of it, at the end of the day, it can close businesses, so apart from the financial losses, the reputational losses, the employees that's being affected by it, the human value at the end of it, also, and the business that everybody's building up in South Africa, we're in a fighting economy, trying to grow and to make the best of the situation we have. And I think it shows South Africans, just like the World Cup rugby and our cricket players now, and just our attitudes of South Africans, whatever you bring and throw our way, we're gonna come and we're gonna still do our best to make a success from what we have, and we're showing that in South Africa with our.
But a lot of what we're talking about really hinges on how organizations manage and process data. I think, can you talk a little bit about particularly things like, King 4, which is compliance for particularly kind of listed entities, but that equally applies to public sector organizations, small organizations,
right?
And how organizations are required to manage the vulnerabilities of their digital ecosystems. Everybody's going into digital and digitalization today. Share a little bit about your thoughts around King 4 and those kinds of areas.
Perfect. Right, yes, like you mentioned, the JSE listed companies, it's as per King 4, like the 12th principle in that. But even if you look at from 10, like your risk management, what you need to look at there, they all integrate. We're living in a world of integrated reporting, integrated workplaces, integrated data, and all of that. So yes, how do you structure that? How do you make sense of it? How do you get control over that and comply and still tick all the other boxes that we need to tick, because there's so many, right? So if you think of the application of it, there's obviously your data protection and the way that you manage your information with the guidelines of Principle 12, which I think is also quite extensive. So the people that works with that will know what it means and how to and what they need to do. And it's not a you mentioned earlier, it's not a question of when, but they have to also, and that's or if question.
Yes.
But for them, for listed companies, they need to comply with those, and obviously for the better of society, and everyone else around them, and the environment. So I think apart from that, there's South African National Archives detention periods and deletion policies for records management, records classification. So apart from your vulnerabilities and your data, where it's sitting, basically, also your working data and your data and your business process data and your records that employees have access to, and your public records, and all those things need to be managed with certain guidelines, aspect classifications, and that's set in file plans. And there's integration with that with POPIA, for example, with employee records in HR, or at schools with the pupils and the learners. And then as you go from department to department, you've got your financial and your, for example, accounts payable, your international financial reporting standards, but the UN Global Compact, the Sustainable Development Goals, all these things come together, and a lot of the South African companies and multinational organizations also adhere to those voluntary and ethical codes and ESGs, and which basically assists as per the voluntary code of King 4 in certain ways, in the way that you apply it. So I think we can probably expand more on that. I don't know if that answers the question in a way.
I think what's clearly happening now is that more and more compliance requirements and governance requirements are being imposed on organizations. And as much as it sounds onerous, it's also with good intention to actually protect the information, because ultimately you want to protect the data and you want to protect the customers whose data that belongs to. Right. And I think companies and organizations have a responsibility towards their clients, customers, end users in managing and protecting their data. So I fully understand that. I mean, I've done a lot of work in my previous roles in King 3 and King 4, and it's a very difficult task to execute on. And you think you've covered all of your bases, but it just requires you to have missed one or two, and you could get into trouble. So very, very challenging environment. And I think, we've been spending a lot of time talking now largely about cybersecurity and cybercrime, but I just wanted to step back in terms of what Ricoh does. Right. And, you almost have 6 different pillars in terms of your digital services offerings. Right. Let's just touch on those 6 and share with those before we go back into cybersecurity specifically for today.
Great, thank you. I think, yes, thanks for the opportunity to expand on that, because I would like to touch on that. I think something, just from a Ricoh perspective as a digital services company, that's I think that's definitely shows and I think just testifies of repositioning Ricoh as a digital services company. So our digital services pillars is basically a portfolio that makes sense for the future's workplace. So with our current midterm plan and our strategies with leading change at work and fulfillment through work for employees and all those aspects, basically is part of Ricoh's strategy and vision for the future, to have a portfolio that just makes sense for today and for the future and for businesses. And because of where we come from traditionally as a business and within the office automation space where we're well known, if you look at, for example, the Vedantics green quadrant for workplace systems integrators report of 2023. Ricoh is positioned there as a systems integrator, and it's not compared to any of our traditional oppositions that for example, IDC, where we in IDC with your workplace or your print transformation, Ricoh is a leader there. So, Ricoh's been driving it through acquisitions, a lot of acquisitions as well, but basically future-proofing the business. And if you look into the reports, you'll see like some of the differentiating factors, for example, was on the report, and what they highlighted was that Ricoh is about 10 years ahead. When COVID hit at that time, when we started, when hybrid became a thing, Ricoh was basically, in some cases, we're more than 10 years ahead of where we used to be. And so when that and hybrid work needed to be implemented, we were ready to go. But that just accelerated everything for us even more. And I think that obviously drove all the strategies for all the acquisitions and everything. Okay, but the pillars is like business process management. We covered that in a previous podcast in more detail with DocuWare there, where we Diamond Club and the best in the world. It was in the top 10 in the best in the world with DocuWare as well. But we've got our then our cybersecurity. We've got the digital experience, cloud and infrastructure services, digital workplace, and then Ricoh graphics communications as well. So that full portfolio, and if you look at, around everything, the smartwatches we're wearing, the phones we've got on us, everything is a vulnerability. Everything in your IT ecosystem is something that needs to be looked at. So we already had so much of it that, we needed to obviously move with and look ahead to be able to take our customers and ourselves on this journey to remain relevant and future-proof our business, society, our customers, our business partners, everyone else in our supply chain and our value chains.
Thanks for sharing that. And I think, you've really used your core strengths of where you've come from historically and built around that and started looking at that broader ecosystem of where you can play from a digital point of view. So I think that shows the kind of strength that you're building in your company. I want to just switch back to the cybersecurity conversation. It seems like that's our topic for today. But there's some very groundbreaking capability you guys have produced in terms of Ricoh's ransom care. It's a fascinating product, and we spoke a little bit about it yesterday, that it's been in the market for about a year. Just share a little bit more about what that product is capable of doing and how it works.
Sure, perfect. So it's just to just also clarify that we've been live in South Africa from Ricoh South Africa operating company perspective for about a year now. And we have onboarded a few customers who's got that peace of mind now with our Ricoh Ransom Care, so which is what it's called. It's a Ricoh Ransom Care, so it's a ransomware containment solution. So it's not a prevention. We're not competing with your prevention and detection and your first layers and lines of defense. Ricoh went in with the digital factories and R&D and looked into obviously all these things to find the right product offerings within and services within our portfolio to basically address those gaps that were there, which we know there aren't many, So we're not competing. We actually a last line of defense with Ricoh Ransom Care in your ecosystem within your IT environment where your crown jewel data is stored, basically. So we protect the crown jewel data, and as the ransomware strains, and I think as technology and as artificial intelligence and all these things also has got a good and a bad side to it, and things are changing. It's becoming, obviously more of a problem, and especially like ransomware strains, just like what we saw with what actual virus strains do and mutate, happens with ransomware viruses and other viruses. So they find other ways to try and penetrate through your layers of defense. So relying on, all the examples we're seeing globally, those organizations got how many layers in place? Where do you actually draw the line on what's enough and what is actually enough protection? But so they are investing, and it doesn't mean they don't have the world's greatest cybersecurity strategy and products and services and everything in place in the environment. There could be that one strain or that one person that clicks on a mail for some reason or does something out of the ordinary that they didn't expect, or that virus basically manages to penetrate through, which we see happening all the time, still managing to find ways to get through. And that's where we look at it differently. So with Ricoh Ransom Care, it's unique in the way that it basically looks at what the purpose of ransomware is, and that is to encrypt as much of your data as quick as possible. So it basically looks at the speed of your encryption of the data and will pick it up and flag it as malicious and basically stop it in its tracks right there. So it's like a sprinkler system within a building where a fire breaks out, it's supposed to break the fire there and contain it straight away. Yeah. That's what Ricoh Ransom Care is. So, yes.
No, so absolutely. I mean, in the way I think about it, it's a real time or a very near real time solution to mitigate ransomware. And like you said, you're not in the prevention business; you're in the mitigation business,
Correct.
particularly. So it's very timeous that you can stop something spreading, and
Yes.
obviously if it encrypts a portion of the data, you can always recover that, or that's going to be the worst loss you're going to experience rather than all your data being encrypted. You're talking about layers and layers of security. Whenever I spoke about security, I always found that a very nice analogy that I would always use is that of an onion. It comes in layers and layers,
Yes.
and you've got to keep undoing each layer to figure out what's going on inside the organization.
Yeah.
Clearly,
your
your solutions clearly focus on a very, very difficult challenge. And, of what you've seen in the marketplace, locally, globally, what is the effectiveness of the solution? If you could, I don't know,
Sure.
quote a number or just give us a sense.
Yes. Look, I think, and what I'll do here is I'll quote some of my Ricoh Europe colleagues who we also spend a lot of time with on calls with customers as well. And no one will give you 100% guarantee that,
Yes.
That's going to be 100% durable and foolproof. Yes. So no one will give 100%, but, that we mention to our customers that going as close as saying, 99.9%, because we haven't had one incident where we have implemented Ricoh ransom care globally through the operating companies in Europe and all over, and especially in the UK. It's been our cybersecurity is really strong. I think from your background, you'll be interested to also know that Ricoh has been dealing with cybersecurity and providing cybersecurity services for Vodafone for many years in the UK as well. So there's different IT services being offered there.
I think, Marcell, it's been a great conversation, and we've spoken a lot about cybersecurity today. So before we close the podcast, do you have any final messages you'd like to leave with our audience?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity for this as well. Look, I think it's information overload in an information era that we're living in. It's things that I've seen like fourth industrial revolution. I think some of the notes I've seen you could call it the information revolution, really also looking at that, and now the other things that's coming in with technology and all these things. So where to find and what to. So you also, with all your CIO experience, I'm sure we want to call yesterday with a CIO from Ricoh Europe, where we discussed quite a few things. And the things that's so important in an organization today, with security being such a massive thing, and I mean security being such a complex thing, like basic things like public cloud, private cloud, on-premise. What is some people still felt on-premise is much safer because of so many reasons. We've all seen how that's changed and why it was proven not to be in most cases. But I would just say reach out. There is experts, and I think there's systems and system integrators in place that's got the not just the technical know-how, but the products and the experience, and because you deal with it on a daily basis with the different elements to guide you through that. And it's impossible to achieve these things without the technology. So then technology should be an enabler for people, and that's what we want it to be. We want it to enrich the world, technology, not the opposite. And that's where we want to, and that's where we were making a difference with that, and being environmentally sustainable with all of those things that goes with that as well. So reach out. It's not as, the cost of doing nothing, we've seen many times, is the biggest cost. Mm-hmm. So just leaving it, waiting for, saying, okay, I'm parking this, go and prioritize, and maybe just get a few external insights as well with audits and things like that. Just a few people. It's such an interesting thing as well. And let's win the cyber war. Let's show these people. Let's find a way. I mean, there should be, and I believe if the people are clever enough to be so successful in it, I think from an ethical perspective, we can be just as clever and even better than them. And I think we need to channel all of us together and for the better of society.
Yeah, Marcell, thank you very much for your time. I think, the world's obviously accelerating at a rapid pace in terms of digital and digitalization. But thanks. Thank you for a very engaging conversation and sharing kind of the offerings and solutions that Ricoh has towards these very, very difficult challenges that I think most organizations are dealing with. And let's see how we can help secure and safeguard our digital ecosystems.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Jaydev. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.